A truly remarkable week and a half of chess has finally come to an end. So the Sinquefield Cup concluded yesterday, the 11th of September, in a dramatic playoff round between Alireza Firouzja and Jan Nepomniachtchi. Now, before I go on to show you that game, I do want to say a quick thank you to everyone for tuning in during this tournament, watching the recaps, commenting, liking. The support's greatly appreciated, and do consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. I will be working on a video in the next couple of days looking at this whole chess cheating scandal, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, so do hit subscribe to not miss that one or any future videos. And finally, if you do want to support the channel, then check out the membership section. You get some more interaction with myself if you're interested in that, and the support for the channel is greatly appreciated as I try and grow it and move it forward. I'd like to revamp this room, for example, make it a bit more chessy. So thanks very much for all of that support moving forward. Now on to the game here. So Alireza Firouzja has white in this final game that I'm going to show you. He just held on to a draw against Jan in the first playoff game. They had 15 minutes plus 10 seconds of move. And so he now has white trying to win the tournament. And by the way, Jan's head is a bit frazzled. He played for 5 hours against Hans Niemann, should have won the game but couldn't break it down in the end game. Hans held on to the draw. Alireza made a quick one against MVL, so Alireza much fresher here. Can Jan hold on with the black pieces? So here we go. Alireza kicks off with pawn c4, and we go down a line which we saw earlier in the tournament. Alireza played this line as white against Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. So here we had pawn c6, preparing d5, knight f3 now from Alireza, the pawn kicked on, the knight finds a home here, and now d5 comes. And the interesting thing about this position is that after pawn captures, queen captures, we don't see the pawn retaking, which would seem most logical. I covered all the subtle reasons behind that in my Shaq game, so do check that one out. But basically, if you go with the pawn, the knight comes to c3, pawn d3, and the black centre's really coming under fire. So queen takes is the tried and tested move. And now in that game against Shaq, we saw knight to c2, the queen came to h5, and Alireza didn't like this one, because this pawn hadn't come to e3, the queen could come there, and black got a better game out of the opening. Alireza went on to win, but only because Shaq kind of crumbled in the middle game. So in this one, Alireza goes pawn e3. He supports that knight, and he stops this queen h5 stuff, as we can see. So now we had knight a6 from Nepo, and this is a rarer move. Normally you see something like queen e5 here, most common move, and the idea is you step out of this bishop pin, so if d3 immediately, for example, well, you can capture, the bishop's not going to hit your queen. So after knight a6, it's double-edged. Now here we had d3 immediately, bishop b4 check, this was Nepo's follow-up idea. Now knight c3 was played, blocking that check, we had a captures, pawn recaptures, and the knight came to c5. Looking at these light squares. So this is the whole idea of Nepo's approach, and it does actually pay off in the opening here because Alireza goes immediately wrong. So he should just take on e4 here, and after knight recaptures, the game goes on. He can go queen c2 or castles. I won't go too much deeper on the line because we see something similar in the game. But what he does instead is go pawn c4, thinking there's not too much difference, pick up that tempo on the queen, but now Nepo had a great response of queen to h5, but he didn't find it. He moved within 20 seconds, played on autopilot, but if he'd have found this move, it's very difficult to meet and keep advantage. So if you take the queen, well, now we can flick in this move of takes with check. Say king e2, it's not forced, but even if you go f1, the lines are similar. You could take with check, rook recaptures, knight takes, bishop takes. Now the material is even, but black's got the better pawn structure and just solved all of their problems basically. Completely equal position. And if you don't chop the queens off, say you take this pawn first to stop this check, well, now the queen can take here. Ruin the castling rights, pick up the pawn, and again the position's just roughly level. Okay, you can come here, stop the knight check, and okay, black's fine, equalised, even more than equalised you could argue. But here Nepo missed it. He goes queen to e5, Alireza gets to take here, and so we transpose back into those lines that would have occurred if he'd taken on the e4 immediately. So this knight recaptured, now we had castles, this one came into c5, kicks the knight, it dropped back into b3 in order to keep protection of the rook from this queen here, and now Nepo goes castles, and although this position might look fairly equal, white's actually got advantage here, and this is why. Pawn f3 from Alireza. So after the knight moves away, then he goes e4, and this is the problem for black. The white pawn centre is very fluid, very mobile, f4, e5, unstoppable, and so even though you give a pawn, which was the best move by the way, but Nepo didn't play it, well now you can go f4, queen c3 is best, and e5. You take all of this space, and although you're currently a pawn down, you're either going to win this one back, or sometimes the b7 pawn, and white just builds up a big initiative. Sometimes you start attacking the black king as well. So this was the way to go for Nepo, even though he would have been slightly worse, taking on c4. But instead of going for this, he now just makes a terrible blunder. So he goes queen e7, preempting f4, but this runs into a shocking tactic, which Alireza finds instantly. Can you find the move if you pause the video? So the move that Alireza played here was pawn to e5. So you're forking both of those knights, but if the queen captures, now there's bishop f4, and it's completely busted. Say queen f5, well you just pick up a whole piece. Even if you stay with the knight, you still pick up a whole piece. However you want to take it, that's completely gone. So after e5, I mean Nepo could basically resign on the spot, but he chops this pawn off here. Now we had takes on f6, queen recaptures, and if he could somehow achieve kind of b6, get the bishop out, rooks connected, he could maybe try and generate counterplay, but queen to d5 is a great move. You hit this knight, you stop the pawn coming to b6, so bishop e6, forced as the best move, protects this one, and now Alireza takes on c5. Best move. Why doesn't he take on b7? Well, now when you eliminate this pawn, you've got access to d4, so the queen and knight can now use that square. So h6 from Nepo, pawn to f4, the rook centralized here, and now f5 from Alireza. He's just pushing all the pieces back off the board. b6 kicked the queen, it jumped into c7, and after rook c8 sliding back, here Alireza doesn't even take the pawn. Was technically the best move, but why kind of put your queen offside when you can just hop back and keep all the pressure, not let Nepo get any tricks at all? So now the bishop drops back to d7, queen d4 centralized, and Alireza's just forcing the queens off the board. Say you tried to go queen e7, keep them on, well then f6 comes and you're just completely blasting open the king side. Clearly this is horrendous. So the queens had to come off, knight recaptured, this rook came to the d file, and now bishop f4 completed the development, connected the rooks. Nepo went bishop a4 here, so he opens this attack, but Alireza just calmly drops the knight back. It hits f3, prepares to come to e5 at the right moment, and after bishop c2, hitting this pawn, Alireza goes g4 to defend. The knight came to b2, looking to hop into d3. Knight e5 now played, covers that square, and if you go f6 immediately to kick away this knight, well it can just jump into c6, you hit the rook, if that one goes away, well now you can bring a rook to the c file. You hit the bishop, it moves away, and then there's this common tactic of checking on e7, because if rook takes, well then you pick up the exchange anyway. If you don't take, if you move the king, we pick up the exchange, in fact a whole rook there. So obviously it's just terrible, f6 no good. Bishop a4 was played, preempting this rook c1 stuff, knight c6, but now the rook came anyway, forces an exchange. Now pawn f6, Alireza jumped here, and after knight d3, forking these two pieces, Alireza goes rook c7, dominating that 7th rank, looking at these pawns, and here Nepo's just had enough. He actually resigned the game, because if he takes this one, well fine, you just take back with the knight, you're still completely winning. Piece up, only for a pawn, which you're about to win back, nothing to be said. So a crushing win there from Alireza, but in fairness to Nepo, he was shattered, really demoralised from not winning his classical game, so he wasn't fully at the races. So Alireza Firouzja, he not only wins the Sinquefield Cup, but he also wins the Grand Chess Tour due to this phenomenal performance in St. Louis. So he bagged, I think it was about $187,500. Truly phenomenal payday for him, and he gets all the kudos with winning the Grand Chess Tour and the Sinquefield Cup. So congratulations, Alireza, fantastic tournament, and do check out my future videos where I'll be covering more of this drama. If you want to see the game that broke the internet, Carlsen versus Niemann, in case you missed that one, do click here. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.